So as a Marine officer who has been proud to serve, been in key positions, leveraged my skills both on and off the battlefield, I've really enjoyed my role at the American Legion. I've really enjoyed helping citizens throughout the world with space technology. I've really enjoyed writing books to help a number of citizens understand what's happening in our government, and also to think a little beyond the current horizon. An example would be one of my latest books is creating what I call Hypersonica, which is a Mach 5 aircraft for commercial use. And this is fun to design, fun to build, a number of things where I've gotten good reviews and saying, hey, maybe it could be a reality. Sure hope so someday.
Where can people find your books?
My books are on Amazon, eBay, Barnes & Noble, all around the internet. You just have to look under Jason O'Neill. The Hypersonica vehicle is fun because I learned that the Arabs complained about the use of such a vehicle because the trip from Dubai to Frankfurt was only 2 hours and 20 minutes, and they couldn't watch the entire movie. I said, oh, and you're complaining about that trip? Anyway, the reality is I've really enjoyed the role of helping people, whether, like I said earlier, whether it's from working with vets today to outreach in the community, to educating people about what's happening in our government. It's fundamental to who Jason O'Neill is, and I'm so glad to be part of this documentary. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions or any comments? Be glad to take them at this point.
Can you speak a little bit about what fighting at Hue was like?
Yeah, I tried to touch the surface. I don't want to go into too much of it. I guess there are too many bad memories. And actually, I'll give you one of them. But it was from building to building, no doubt about it. You literally had to put your back up against the wall and throw a grenade in the room in hopes that nobody could shoot at you when you turn the corner. You know, really shocking. Today we have weapons that can turn the corner. In other words, the laser sight takes the data from the distance, brings it back into the projectile. We shoot the projectile and it explodes. You can't even hide behind a tree. It works. Well, we didn't have that, you know, back there in 68, 69. And so, again, you're fighting in the rain. You're fighting at night. You can't see the, you know, the enemy. It could be a youngster who's been brainwashed by the PLN and the NFL. And so it just was a situation where you just didn't know whether you'd secured a facility, whether through hand combat, squad combat, blasting the hell out of the place using one of our big tanks, or bringing in selected bombing, which was really difficult because we were in harm's way.
I think I read where initially they wouldn't allow airstrikes.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to destroy the store.
That because it was, yeah, the Citadel was the regional capital.
Right.
And yeah, it became one of those things. Well, politically, the Marine pilots said, no, wait a minute. We got men on the ground. We're going to go in and have selective fire. And that's really what happened. I'm glad you asked about Hue. One of the personal scenarios, and this is a little tough to admit, when we finally left the Citadel and got back to our compound, two of my Marines aimed a .50 caliber machine gun at me. Yeah, 50 caliber machine gun. They were high on marijuana. The battle was so tough that they were trying to forget what would happen, what really happened. And I was the authority. I was their closest commander that, represented why they were there in the first place, even though it was part of the containment strategy in the big picture. So I ducked behind a refrigerator, and it saved my life.
They fired a weapon?
They fired a 50 caliber machine gun
At you?
at me from a truck in the motor pool, which was about 100 yards away. And I was fortunate to dive down behind a refrigerator, and the compressor literally saved my life. Yeah. I actually had to spend 2 extra months in country in a court-martial and sent them to prison. Tough to do with a fellow Marine, but it was all psyche. It was that tough. When I mentioned that war is hell, that's one aspect of it. And it's tough to repeat, bad memory, but nevertheless an aspect of what it's like to go to war. So I want to thank you for the opportunity, the documentary. Look forward to a very successful campaign. And if there's someone else that I can help bring here to describe more of it, please let me know. The tank is an interesting vehicle. You've got, 30, 50,000 pounds of rolling, making a lot of noise. It's the most feared thing by ground troops, because not only do they fear that this huge thing can blast them, but also could crush them. So we learned that in World War I and in World War II again. Even the trenches, you got a tank at the end of the trench, boom, you blow up everyone in the trench, or you start to seal off the entrance. Yeah, a group, literally, it only took 5. You had to have an operator, you had to have, a navigator, you had to have 2 loaders, and you had to have literally a sergeant typically commanding the vehicle. It's one of those things where it isn't easy. Tanks don't like rice paddies. So it's a situation where you were contained into very small spaces for maneuvers. In most cases stuck to the road, particularly in a tropical environment. And guess what? They mined the roads. And in those days, we certainly didn't have any mine detection in advance for a moving vehicle. And so, or if we sent one out, fine. You clear a mine, they put a new one in overnight. So it was a situation where, yes, it was a formidable weapon, but under the circumstances, given pound for pound, air superiority was much more effective than any munitions on the ground. Yeah. We used a lot of cannons, we used a lot of mortars, we used a lot of different big pieces of artillery. But long term, my personal opinion is that the air power, and we really learned to use the air power to support the troops, that was the most effective. So I'm proud of the role I had in these big motorized monsters, but ultimately it was the air power that made a difference. Did it help win the war? No, we lost. Did it help a lot of Marines and soldiers survive? You bet, you bet. And it was one of those things where I would say today that now with the modern Air Force and the Space Force, we're going to be using a lot more drones. We can literally fight a war from El Segundo in California, even though it's around the world. And this is what modern warfare is becoming. The question is, who's our next adversary? Yeah, and I just finished a book about that, and it should be pretty clear to everyone who is watching this documentary that it's China. And if you don't think so, call me up, talk to someone, get the real scoop, because that's where America is headed in confrontation with China. Not Russia, not the Middle East, it's China. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Wow, that was that's a hell of a year.
Yeah, for tens of thousands.
Yeah,
And,
the whole Tet Offensive, nobody saw it coming. All of a sudden, boom, here it was.
Yep.
And I've heard one thing is about the Battle of Hue. I've heard the weather was terrible.
Yes, of course. You're socked in February, the rainy season.
It was cold. It was rainy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you never get dry, say for a month, you start to shake.
Yeah.
Your whole body starts to shake because you can't get heat.
Doesn't that open you up to like all kinds of like fungal infections and stuff?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Hardcore. And urban combat, I mean, that's got to be like the worst, isn't it?
It is. It is. And quite frankly, Robert, one of the key things out of Hue and Vietnam was the ability to fight in guerrilla style. Prior to that, it was open warfare, tanks and trenches and troops like World War II in Korea.
Right.
But now when you're in the jungle at night in the rain, it's a whole different story.
Small unit actions.
Small unit actions, clandestine, sometimes with fire support, but not always because of the circumstances. Also the role of intelligence. Where is the enemy? The enemy's underground in a tunnel. How do you know? Prove it. How do you save lives, Marines, by not going into that tunnel when you know it's a booby trap? That is just one idea of the role of intelligence that really was amplified in Vietnam. That's really important. Vietnam also taught us that we had to march on our stomach. That was critical.
Or MREs.
Yeah, I may have told you that MREs, and there were preferred sea rations. Believe me, we would trade sea rations as to who wanted what. And the key was always to stay away from the lima beans.
Oh, really?
They tasted horrible, no matter what they did to them. But that's
the freshmen are awful.
Little of it, yeah, that's true. Yeah. So, and also in my talking about Vietnam, maybe I didn't quite point out the role of television, the role of the media. Yeah. I mentioned that when I come back from a combat mission, I could see it on the evening news, Walter Cronkite. Well, that did two things. It demoralized the troops in the field, and it also embrazened the students on the campuses. So it was a real interesting time in our history when the media really started to fight the war. And we're experiencing
for the other side.
Yes, sir. We're experiencing it today. In the situation with Russia and the Ukraine. Times don't change. The environment does. The ability to fight does. But it's still based on one thing for which the Marines are really proud, bravery.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Some of the storied characters, John Basilone, Chesty Puller. Greg Bollington.
Oh, good. Yes, of course.
Smedley Butler.
We've named camps after Butler.
Yeah.
Because he was so good.
I mean, these are larger than life characters,
They are.
Yeah.
They really are. And Audie Murphy and others who
Army
became Army. The bottom line is bravery under duress on behalf of your country.